I would actually argue it in the other direction. This goes back to something that you and I started talking about almost 15 years ago, and that's the role of
student,
student, teacher, long time ago.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the role of credibility.
You have the gray hair.
I had more hair then too. That's the role of credibility in online space. And people trust speech more when they know who's behind it, when they have the reasons behind its motivation. And that's why you're seeing, for example, I mean, you know, on Daily Kos, you know, the most popular liberal website, within the past 6 months, all of the front page posters and an increasing number of the commenters on the site have gone from, you know, pseudonymous usernames, you know, CagroX, Dem from CT, you know, MC Joan, to posting under their real names, you know, to associating what they're saying to their real, you know, to their real life biographies and experiences. And I do think, you know, while they're, you know, while anonymity and pseudonymity absolutely needs to be protected in this space, that at the same time, you know, there's going to be a natural evolution to people speaking under their own names as well because of the credibility I think it often affords speakers. When you know that it's this, you know, the same person who's talking each time, and you understand where they're coming from, what their motivations are.
Okay, so let's stay on that thread for a second. I don't want to spend too much time in this conversation dwelling on the dark side, because I think often when we talk about the internet, often it's the bogeymen and the predators and the scary stuff that people want to fixate on. But what about disinformation online? You know, those emails that went around the last 2 years that Obama's a Muslim, you know, et cetera, and the campaign had to spend a lot of money trying to counter them. How do you view that? I mean, it's obviously a form of speech that, you know, you can't regulate it. You shouldn't try to regulate it. I mean, there's that saying that, you know, a lie goes around the world in the time it takes the truth to get its boots on. Is the internet making this problem better or worse?
Yeah, so we used to talk about this as an attention-span problem. You could call it the 140 character problem. And by that I mean, there are some issues that take more than 140 characters to understand, right? So, or you could say there's some issues that take more than 2 minutes to understand. But those same issues are the sort of issues where it's only rational to spend 30 seconds trying to understand it. So you know people will systematically misunderstand it because it's rational to misunderstand it because, again, by hypothesis, you should only spend 30 seconds trying to understand this. And that creates this significant problem in places where there's not an editor who says, look, I know nobody's going to understand this, so we're not going to cover it because this is not going to be understood. The internet exacerbates this problem dramatically, not for presidential campaigns, because presidential campaigns are the sort of things where, you know, you need to get around to trying to figure this question out. The first time the issue is raised, is he a Muslim? Well, I'm not sure why that's interesting anyway, but some people found it particularly significant. Okay, you're going to pay attention, and third or fourth time around, you'll get enough information to figure it out. But it's the, you know, it's the third or fourth layer down from that. People who have information spread about them, which you know, it might take a couple minutes to try to figure out what this is about, but nobody's going to give them a couple minutes. And for those people, for that class of information, I think this is a significant question about how we deal with that problem.
Yeah, well, maybe this is the time to bring up the Section 230 case.
Yeah, the auto-admit stuff.
You want to describe that? I don't know if everybody here is familiar with this case.
Yeah, I mean, there is this website called autoadmit.com, which exists for law school students and law school applicants, you know, ostensibly to discuss the law school experience. And what it has become, because, you know, it is anonymous and pseudonymous, and nobody posts under anything like their real names, and there's no kind of linkability to that, is a cesspool of libel and slander towards law school students, and especially towards female law school students. These are the 10 hottest women at Yale Law School, you know. I just saw, you know, this named student today, you know, and she's really showing her breasts today. On, and it is absolutely sick and disgusting stuff, and you know, it is poisoning the law school experience for a number of women and making it an almost unlivable place. What has happened, you know, two of the women who were the victims of this corruption, you know, decided finally to sue one of these websites, you know, to sue autoadmit.com, you know, to sue this list of anonymous posters, as well as the website itself, you know, to obtain damages. Well, under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, you can't sue the website itself. What that portion of the law says, as part of the 1996 Act, is that the publisher of a website is not considered the publisher in terms of libel and defamation law. Basically, they put the onus on publishers to clean up sites themselves. At the time, it was mostly because of all the pornographic images that Congress was afraid of. But what has ended up happening as a result is it's impossible to go after the posters themselves, because all you generally have at most is an IP address, and oftentimes that's just one of 50 computers at a law school library. You're never going to trace it back to the original person. What eventually I think is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years is, because of the unavailability of recourse to these victims, is that you're going to start seeing a scaling back of the Section 230 protections, and you're going to start seeing websites on the hook more for libel and slander unless they can turn over the identities of the people who post on these sites. It is something that's starting to bubble up now. It is going to cut back on some level of internet posting freedom. And I don't know if in this case, given the gravity of the harms that's being caused, how much of a bad thing it is. It is troubling in a lot of respects.
Yeah, and what people need to understand, and this goes to what Larry was saying about, folks who aren't presidential candidates, but sort of ordinary people. People are Googling these women's names, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're applying for a job.
Exactly.
And up very high in the results are these kind of slanderous, nasty comments. Larry, do you think this is a serious problem? I mean, do we, we've taken it for granted, right? That a site host, owner, does not have to police their comments, and they can't really be held legally liable. I mean, are we on a collision course here? Are we going to see that freedom cut back? Should we?
Well, I think it's first important to recognize there's a parallel, not quite as robust set of immunity granted to websites on the basis of copyrighted material, right? So this is the whole issue of YouTube's defense against Viacom, where Viacom says it should be responsible for copyright violations. YouTube says the statute says we're not liable so long as we take these steps to take something down. And I think in both of these areas, you're going to see a significant pushback against that grant of immunity to websites. So what would the solution look like here? I think the more fundamental problem is a very deep architectural problem at the internet. We don't have an identity layer in the internet. An identity layer shouldn't be a layer that necessarily ties everything back to Adam Bonin or Larry Lessig. It should allow Adam to have an identity that isn't necessarily tied directly to easily identify him. But a proper identity layer would allow traceability in the sense that I could, if I had the proper authority, meaning if a court said you need to find out who did this, go back and find out that it was Adam who did this. And if we had that layer of identity in the internet, then I think something like what Adam was describing, where you say to sites, well, if you're not going to facilitate at least traceability for speech that is properly actionable, then you might face your own responsibility, would be, I think, the type of compromise that would exist. Now, recognize this creates enormous problem in non-democratic or First Amendment speech-like places, right? So I have no concern, really, that if we had that Adams regime in the United States, political speech could still be anonymous, and that would be fine. But I do have enormous concerns that in places like China, the same architecture of traceability is used to lock up journalists or used to lock up bloggers, as it is in the Middle East and in China and all over the world where free speech norms don't exist. And this has always been the issue we talked about 15 years ago in the first cases, first classes on cyber law, the core problem of the internet. If you have fundamentally different legal regimes operating on the same architectural platform, how do you facilitate diversity that doesn't destroy the freedom in places you don't want it destroyed?